Hi everyone. Sailor Moon Serena, Sailor Mini Moon, Small Moon, Little Moon, Arini here. And today we're going to talk about folks who were open-minded to Ernest being Sailor Earth. Now I know this would have been a film that Ernest himself would have made, but his film won't be until tomorrow. So anyway, there were many folks who were open-minded to Ernest being Sailor Earth, but at the same time, there were many folks who were not. Now, folks who may have not been open-minded to Ernest being Sailor Earth, or those who say there shouldn't be a Sailor Earth, would happen to be those, who followed that oversight that Naiko Takaguchi or Takenshi came up with many years ago and think that everybody has to follow it. Well, we don't have to follow it at all. And we never did. And nothing happened to us. So Ernest being Sailor Earth did not come out of luck. He was going to be Sailor Earth way back in 2008 YL, when even before the Euro Fairway was even a thing. Now, we made our first with our thing, and he was going to be Sailor Earth. Now there would have been many names that we would have called him, and some folks thought we would have called him Earth Knight. Now you might think to yourself that that would be a cool name, and that would have been the name we would have called him, but no, we didn't call him that. Now, Ernest became Sailor Earth somewhere in 2008 YL, but he didn't show up until 2009 YL, when he met up with the rest of us. And a lot of folks might say he was the first manned sailor fighter. I guess he was. If some folks don't want to give Dustin and Jordan and Julian the look for being the first, then whatever. So, but there were some unlikenesses though. One, he had longs. Yes, he had longs on, but his cast was all the same. He had the same sailor-like clothing, which someone might know for learning clothing, worn by learners that go to Dawnish Learn. But most folks might also see them as clothing worn by skilled sailors who work on ships. Now, at the end of the day, he still kept his cap. That didn't go away. And a lot of folks out there would wonder, what kind of skills and craft did he have? What kind of strikes did he have? What did he bring to the sailor fighters that we didn't already have? Well, to tell you the truth, Sailor Moon, what Ernest as Sailor Earth brought to the team, well, some folks would say that you already had two meatball heads on the team, two Ditzes, Serena and Mina. And a lot of folks would think that you wouldn't need another one of those. And I'm not being shameful by saying that, but that's the first thing that folks would think, And at first he was welcome to the sailor fighters, like everyone. I mean, he helped us out and came on the team and helped fight off Mephistopheles when Mephistopheles was winding up his last time as the first Wicker of Hell, and got us to some fun fair that he wanted to take us out in, and Sailor Earth showed up. We didn't know he was Ernest at the time, and he froze a white rose, which he only froze, very rarely ever froze, And then after that, he was one on the team after that. Now, he was a latecomer, and he didn't awaken until 2008 YL. And by then, all the elders in the inner sailor fighters had already awakened and already become sailor fighters, and already had been through sundriest wars and all sundry wars, and already fought many foes. So Ernest was a newcomer to it, but he took to it like a fish takes water, you know. Yeah. And some folks might wonder if there are any likenesses or drawings of him as Sailor Earth. Well, there are some, and one of these days we'll show them to you. But a lot of these drawings are the only drawings out there on the interweb as Ernest as Sailor Earth, or Ernest P. Worrell as Sailor Earth. Well, you're right about that, Reenie. You're right, Sailor Mini Moon. Small moon, little moon. At the end of the day, Ernest as Sailor Earth was a good thing. And there were some in the Sailor Moon followership, a lot of them who are no longer around anymore. I mean, they're still alive, but they're no longer on Euro anymore. Like Michael Alagi 86 or Nick 2121 or Katrina Chase or Katarina Chase, or Sailor V. Not making it up. Folks who were at one time open-minded to Ernest as Sailor Earth, and they're no longer around anymore, but they were backers of Ernest as Sailor Earth. Now, at the end of the day, did it ever become a thing? Well, Robot Chicken or Told Chicken, I guess, in one of the last followings of the show that they did make fun of this. The sailor fighters, all of us, or sailor keepers, were at some kind of eating hall at some kind of shop somewhere. And sadly, the owner of one of these shops or eating halls or whatever became a fiend, took over him. And we all shapeshifted. And someone said, I'll become Sailor Earth. And everyone's like, there's not a Sailor Earth. And he's like, watch and learn. And then he goes on to do things, He ends up beating the fiend, mostly by mishap, because he shoots his stick off and hits the thing, which puts, all of this, ooze, whatever things around. And they asked him, why is he overweight? And he said most folks on Earth are overweight in some way, more than others. And then he said some kind of kind-hating thing to the fiend, and they say, you can't say that. And he says, kind-hating no longer a thing. Sadly, it still is a thing. And at the end, he says, well, I killed the owner, so now all this belongs to me. And they're like, eat where you shit where you eat, or you sleep. And they go, it's not the saying. And he goes, well, who cares what the saying is? And I say, Sailor Earth makes me feel guilty about being a living being. But then he ends up saying, hey. But then I say, can I get in on some of that ownership? And that was the end of it. So yes, they did make fun of it. And instead, where all the other ones were open-minded, like Sailor Jupiter, Sailor King World, Sailor Venus, Sailor Hellas World, and Sailor Hellas World, and Sailor Mars, Sailor Red World, it was Sailor Quicksilver, Amy, who wasn't that open-minded, and asked him what his might was, what his strikes were. And he says, I got all the craft and mights of all earthlings. So at the end of the day, I do think Ernest being Sailor Earth, sorry about that finger, whatever going on there. I do think Ernest being Sailor Earth is a good thing. And I am happy with the folks that were open-minded to him being Sailor Earth. Because there are many Sailor Earths. Hell, even hidden name Sailor Earth even backed him up and she said, in every world there's a Sailor Earth. And this world just happens to be Ernest, so yeah. So anyway, it is what it is. Tell us what you think about this. And what do you think about Ernest being Sailor Earth? Because even though this really should have been a film he should have been talking about, or should have been in. And do you want to see those likenesses that we made? Well, we didn't make the likenesses, we didn't draw the drawings. But if you want to see them someday, then let us know. We'll show them to you.